Last week on Mixed and Mastered.
I was in Hawaii and he had a show and I reached out to see if we could get tickets. And this is like a ballroom. It's like at the Hilton Ballroom. It's not like a real venue. So we're like in the VIP area. He comes over. He meets my entire family. He
Wow.
gushes over my grandmother. It's just absolutely lovely. And then the next day I took my mom and my niece were swimming with the dolphins. And he was there with his much younger girlfriend, who I think they were together until he passed. And he's got like, this is, this is pre-video phone. So he's got like the big camcorder.
Your camcorder. Yeah.
And he's recording her with the dolphins. And he's like, Lisa, so Tony Bennett was mine for my family. They were just like, oh, wow. Like, okay, wow. Tony Bennett like knows you and takes care of you.
Welcome to Mixed and Mastered, the podcast where the stories of the music industry come to life. I'm Jeffrey Sledge, bringing you real conversations with the people who have shaped the sound of music. We're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to make it in the music business. These are the stories you won't hear anywhere else, told by the people who live them. This is Mixed and Mastered. Now for part two of Lisa Cambridge Mitchell on Mixed and Mastered.
I was at LaFace for 6 years, and
you were there for 6 years.
I was there until they shut down,
and he moved.
We're moving on to take over Arista, and LA was really mad at me because LA was not big on people leaving, right? He was very loyal, and he expected loyalty from people, and I didn't want to work at Arista for a number of reasons. One of the big ones was we had so much autonomy at LaFace. So I was booking everything. I was booking the Grammys. I was booking the BET Awards. I was booking, at some point I became head of marketing while I was there. I started out as director of publicity, and then I became a product manager. And it was funny because Devette was torturing me, and there was like a big scandal that happened at the time. And she literally refused to come back to work. She was just like, I always imagined her like fainting on the couch, like just her assistant was sleeping with somebody she shouldn't have been sleeping with, and she just never came back to work. Like that was it. So LA had kind of wanted me. He had given me a lot of autonomy. I was the only person, like I was a product manager. When I became a product manager, I no longer reported to her, which was odd because all the product managers reported to her. So what they did was they gave me international, because international at that time was publicity based. So it was natural that it was an extension of my job as the head of publicity. Mm-hmm. And then eventually that kind of led to me moving towards marketing. So the first album that I marketed was Usher's My Way album. And that was like my first, like, this is mine from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah.
And I transitioned out of publicity, and then eventually I took over the department, and I used to joke that I was the silent E in LaFace because basically, video, like everybody reported to me. Like video production didn't report me because Billy was there and he was amazing. But publicity reported to me. I led all the budget. I had control over all the budgets. I was like, if you didn't have me, it couldn't happen. Mm-hmm. And LA and I had a relationship that I really appreciated and it was always a little fraught because we would be in a meeting and somebody would have an idea and he would be like, that's a great idea. That's cool. Like, oh yeah, wow, I love that. And then as he walked out of the room, he would just like look at me and I would be like, wow, we're not doing that. Like I would know, like we were so symbiotic. Yeah. It was such a great experience working with someone like that. And so I became the person that did all those big international meetings. Mm-hmm. I used to do all the presentations for that because he didn't really like doing that stuff. Like he liked to a point, but he just didn't want to always have to go to present to BMG overseas. Mm-hmm. And then the head of HR at BMG at the time, Arista, really liked me. So he put me in a lot of the advancement programs. So I got to do a lot of training and I was really supported. I was really, really supported. So when they started talking about me going to Arista, I was going to be in the Black music department. I was no longer going to book Grammys. I was no longer going to book MTV. I was no longer going to book, basically I was going to be reduced.
And I was just like, step backwards.
yeah, it was a step backwards. And I didn't want to work for the person who I would report it to. So I was just like, I think I want to leave. And LA was mad at me. He was really mad at me. But he was fine.
Yeah, he
And
figured.
I ended up going to HBO. This was before the Time Warner merger. HBO was trying to be in the digital space on the urban side, and they started volume.com.
George
And so
Jackson.
we
Is
were
that
like,
George
I
Jackson?
moved.
No, that's not George.
No,
Who
that
was it?
was Kevin Dowdell.
Okay,
He was
okay,
like he was a corporate guy.
okay.
But he hired like the best of the best. It was like Riggs Morales was over there. I was there. Dave Watkins was the one that brought me into it.
Dave, wow.
Yeah, Dave Watkins. And then we had like Veronica Webb was writing for us, and we had like a really great like we were like 2 weeks ahead of the curve. You know what I mean? Like we weren't that far ahead. But then when they did when Time Warner and AOL, which that tells you how old I am, when AOL and Time Warner merged, they got rid of
They
it
did
because
it.
it was like, well, yeah, they deaded it. And it was unfortunate because it was almost like, I mean, we just had an incredible staff. Like it was, and I also made lifelong friends. I mean, one of my friends is my son's godmother. Another friend was just at my house 2 weeks ago for, a couple of weeks.
Mm.
Like we're all like, I built some really great relationships through there. But we had like people that had worked at Children's Television Network. We had people that had worked on Sesame Street. We had people that came out of like LA that had worked with Cosby. We had all of it, and everybody was just so like energized and excited. So it was really sad that it didn't
Yeah,
come
didn't work
together because
out.
they put a lot behind it. So I was there for a very short time, but I was glad to be back in New York because the whole time I was in Atlanta, I was like, I want to go back to New York. Um, and then I took a package and I went and I so they folded. I took a package, and LA was like, hey, we're starting New America with Kenny, and I really, I want you back over there. Like Kenny needs help, and so I agreed to go.
That's Babyface. Kenny is
Yeah,
Babyface.
baby.
For
Yeah,
people who
sorry.
don't
Yeah,
know.
Babyface.
Yeah.
No, I know. I've always called Face or Kenny. Yeah. So he was like, he really needs help. He needs somebody who like knows the how to like structure it, and you would be working with our staff, and here's like basically we were like more of an A&R company than anything else. Um, and he also brought in Andre, and Andre had when you work with somebody when you're really young and they don't realize that you've grown up, right? So he was still dealing with me like it
He
was,
was 21 year
eight
old
years
Lisa. Yeah.
prior. Exactly. And I'm not that person anymore. And I have the same, I have relationships with people who you have relationships with. And so we really butted heads. And what they did, it was really unfortunate because I do, even to this day, I feel like it was a little bit of a setup. They didn't want, Andre had just come off of Uptown where he was like spending money like a drunken soldier, or I mean, drunken sailor. And so they didn't want him to get into that trap. So I was intended to be the person who was, the stopgap for spending. And so I didn't report to him. We were co-equals.
Mm-hmm.
And he just didn't like it. He just didn't like it. And I remember you know, this is not to shade Babyface in any way, because I love him and he was amazing, and working with him he's just incredible. But I remember Babyface, I was 3 months into my 3-year deal, and Babyface called me to the studio and he was like, well, Lisa, you know that Andre can't work with women. And that was like, it was so hard. But I mean, I knew that it was true, but it was so hard, right? And he was like, Andre can't work with women, and this just isn't gonna work. And I was like, okay. And then he wanted me to be his kind of like his manager, assistant. And basically they started telling me he's like, well, you'd come to my house and you'd pack my bags and you'd make sure I have
What?
plates. And I was like, yeah, that was pretty much my response. So when I got a call from, I'll never forget this. I got a call from Clement Williams, who was the head of like, Clement, I think, used to work at the FBI or the CIA or something, and he was head of HR at BMG. And Clement was like you were scared if you heard from Clement, because he was like no freaking joke. And he called me and he was like, hey, so, you're only 3 months into your deal. We're going to give you 10 cents on the dollar for the rest of, for the remainder of your deal. And I was like, okay, so I just want to ask a question. So when Face told me that I was being let go because Andre couldn't work with women. What should I do with that information?
Wow.
And
That
he
was pretty
said,
gangster.
and I didn't even like, I was like, what do I do with that? Like, what do I do with that? And I remember he took a deep breath and sighed. And he was like, did he say that to you? I said, absolutely. And he said, okay, I'll call you back. I never heard from Clement again. I just got the separation agreement that they were going to pay me my 3 years.
Full.
So full. So for 3 years, I was making more money. I was making way more money than I had ever made in my entire career, and I wasn't working. Now, in theory, that's amazing, right? But that messes with your head,
Yeah.
because I was no longer, I had been Lisa from LaFace. I had been
Yeah.
Lisa from Uptown. I had been Lisa. And now I'm just like at home
Yeah.
getting a big ass,
But
like
you're not.
literally
But you're
more
not.
money than I had
But you're
ever
not doing
made.
anything.
I'm not doing anything, and I'm not in the community in the
Mm-hmm.
same way. And it was really hard. It was I was like, I struggled with that. So for 3 years, I was at home.
Wow.
Like, just because they were like, well, if you go back to work, basically they were gonna, like, if I took a
Then
job,
the money cuts off. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So, and I just didn't, there weren't any jobs. I remember when I got promoted to vice president, when Dorsey, at that point, I was, when Dorsey James when I was at LaFace, he promoted me from director level to vice president level. He called me in his office. He was really excited because he had lobbied for me. And he was just like, Lisa, I'm really excited to tell you we're promoting you. And I burst into tears. And he was like, and Dorsey was a very, like, he was like a big brother kind of dad type personality. So I burst into tears, and he was just like,
What's
what
going
is
on?
happening? Yeah. And I said, you're making me unemployable, right? Because how many VPs were
Yeah,
there
not many.
in Black
Not
music,
many.
right? So I was like, you just made me unemployable.
Yeah, not many.
So I was home, I wasn't working, and then Marissa Mencher and I,
Yeah.
Marissa? She was, yeah. So Marissa and I were friendly. She was good friend. Marissa's best friend is one of my best friends, and Marissa was at my house, and I remember I said, she was like, "How are you doing?" I was like, "You know what? I think I should go back to work. Like, I really like this is too comfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I need to go back to work. I'm living on like Third Street. I have a
Yeah. Yeah.
1,200 square foot
You
apartment that
chilling.
I bought.
Yeah.
I'm chilling. I was like, I need, and it was just a right moment that Marissa was just like, wait, are you serious? Because Jive is looking for
Mm-hmm.
somebody. And by that point, there had been so many mergers. All my artists from
That went to
LaFace
Jive.
at
Yep.
Jive,
Hold on one second. Hold on one second.
and they hated
Hold on
it.
one second. Hold on
Yeah,
one second. Give me 2 seconds.
of course. Mhm.
Hey, sorry.
Hey,
Okay.
no worries.
See, I remember you came to Jive because I
So,
was there.
yeah, you were there, and all my artists were there, and they were really unhappy. Like, they were not
Because it wasn't the
checking
same.
for.
It wasn't.
It
Jive
wasn't
was
the
very
same.
different than LaFace.
Yep,
You
exactly.
know.
And so they immediately had somebody who could walk in and talk to,
Barry.
all of those artists. Yeah, I could talk, like, I could walk in and deal with Barry, but I could,
Yeah, talk
I
to art because you had the
deal with
relationships. Yeah.
Usher. I could talk to, yeah, exactly. That I had the relationships, which was it was great timing for me. I mean, it was a step back in terms of title and pay and stuff like that, but it was like I had been employed for 3 years,
Yeah.
so it made sense that it was a step back. And going there it felt very, it felt like that was, wow, I really worked hard to get, like, it really made me appreciate all of the success that I had been a part of up until that point in my career, because walking in the door, I knew my shit. I knew the artists. I knew how to deal with them. I knew how to deal with the managers. Everybody was like, so it was, I liked that. I enjoyed that transition.
Yeah.
And Jive was just like bizarre to me. I mean, the whole time I was at Jive, I was like, I just never forget the label meeting, my first label meeting. And, the meeting's supposed to be at 2, and we go in the conference room and it's 5, and there's no
Barry's still not
Barry,
there.
and there's no,
We're all
yeah.
just
And,
sitting
and
around.
LA, like our meetings, we were tight. Like LA, LaFace was tight. We ran everything. Like we were like boom, 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 everything. So I'm like sitting there and I'll never forget. I went to Larry Kahn's office. I was like, I don't know. I went to Tom Caraba's office and I was like, this is something you should have mentioned in the interview. Like, so every Wednesday, I'm just like a hostage until like, and so I had a really hard time with that because it felt so disrespectful and so entitled. And so
Yeah.
like
You guys will just wait.
it
You
was like
guys will
you
wait
have,
until I'm ready.
right. And when you think about the capital, the business capital and the financial capital of all of those people who are making a lot of money sitting around
Doing
waiting,
nothing.
I was so doing nothing, just not working. I was so offended. Like I struggled with that for years. I was just like, you cannot be serious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, my Jive was interesting for me because Jive showed me, I hate to say this out loud, but Jive showed me that I was never going to get to where I wanted to be in the industry, right? Because I think my general aspirations, and this was why I took the New America job at the time, aside from it being Kenny, being Babyface, I really wanted to be a GM, and I wanted to be a GM for, we had all of these, like when you and I came up, we had all these boutique
Mm-hmm.
labels, like, and lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
labels. And I wanted to be a GM for the next generation of them, right? So we had been talking when I was at LaFace, we were doing a deal. We were trying to do a deal for, with Organized Noise for Red Clay. And we had been talking about me being a GM and it didn't work out. It was fine. But it was like, I really felt like, I'm one of the few executives, and I say this proudly, I'm one of the few executives who've pretty much worked in every department. I have worked, I have done promotion, I have done international, I've done marketing, I've run marketing. Um, I've had creative services report to me, I've had video production report to me, I've had publicity report to me. Like there is not an area um, of the music business when I was in it that I had not had significant experience in, that I could not speak about with authority, right? Because I'd done in promotion, I'd done retail, and then in We3, if you needed help, like if Vanessa had to make calls and she didn't have enough time,
You
I
was
was on the
doing it.
phone doing college promo, like radio promo. So I feel like I was really good at my job because I understood what everybody else had to do. They never had to educate and explain what they needed from me. And I think that my peers really
Mm-hmm.
appreciated that. And then in turn, I was also able to, when my artists were complaining, I was able to explain to them what was
What was
actually
going
going
on?
on and what we
Yeah.
actually needed to do and why it was important,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I wanted my professional goals were to be not a I didn't want to be like a GM at like a Jive. I wanted to be a GM at like that little boutique label that was as impactful as the ones that I had worked
Mm-hmm.
for. And those really didn't exist anymore. All that money. I used to say that like people used to be like, "Oh, the industry is shrinking." I said, "Of course it is because, you know, if the white man in charge of the labels and at the distribution level and at the highest levels, if they're not making money, they're not going to let you make money."
Exactly.
Right. Um, so that was really hard. And I remember at Jive especially, like I could never get anywhere at that company. And I remember going to Tom Caraba and being like, listen, like you got to do more for me. Like I am way too experienced to be like, so Tom, I give Tom credit. Tom was the one that promoted me to SVP, but he gave me the money first. He was like, listen, I can give you the money before I can get you the title. And that always stuck with me. Like, that's so messed up. Right. Like he was like, "Oh, I get you the money. So if you're willing to take the money, the SVP money, and I promise I will work on getting you the title on the next round, of
Mm-hmm.
promotions, I got you." And so that was what he did, and he stood true to his word. He was the one that promoted me. And after with all the mergers, I don't even remember all the mergers that happened. I never ran a department again. Like I had 50 people on my staff at LaFace. I never had more than maybe 6 or 7 people on my staff after I left. Well, no, LaFace, and even at HBO, I had like 56 people or something like that. So I always felt really stunted. Um, and because I felt like the artists that I had, the artists that I worked with were so exceptional, I wasn't really interested in going someplace else, right? And I wasn't really interested, like I wasn't interested in courting another label to try to like, advance my career that way again, because I wanted to work with those people that like had a perspective and had, like I remember, do you remember Little Mama? Remember when we had Little Mama? So I always use this as an example, like, and this goes back to growing up on the Upper West Side, to be honest. Little Mama's dad, True, remember True, was batshit crazy. True was insane. And True and I adored each other, right? And one of the ways that we bonded was we were in a big label meeting. There were all these people in the meeting, and they were like junior, it was more like junior, like worker bee meeting, right? There were all these people in the meeting. And I was watching True, and he was getting offended. And I was like, hey, you guys, can we just take a break? I need a minute with True. And I pulled him aside. I pulled him in my office. We went to my office. And he was like, True was like a pit bull. Like, he was like, ugh, And I was like, True, I just want to make something perfectly clear to you. You can't punch anybody in the face. This is not that situation. They will have you arrested. You will have problems. You cannot come up here and think you're about to like beat somebody down. Yeah, thugging it out. And I remember I could see him, Ian Steeman was talking, and I could see him looking at Ian and like tensing. And I was like, and Ian wasn't even like, Ian was just being Ian and being honest and kind of, but like that, as silly as that may sound, that was my sweet spot. Like somebody like that, like I could use my education and my presentation and my ability to show up and make everybody comfortable and talk to the white leadership that didn't even know any black people, that didn't work for them, and I could also talk to True and be like nigga, no, like no, like you, like yo, what the fuck are you doing? And he used to be like, and I remember in that conversation he was like, that's why I fucks with you, all right, I ain't gonna hurt nobody. I was like, and don't come up here with it, because he was carrying, and I saw that he was carrying, and nobody else saw that shit, and I'm like, don't come up here with a gun again, please. And he was like, ha, 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 ha. I'm like,
not dead ass. Like you gotta chill.
Yeah, dead ass. Like you can't do this shit. Like you need to like break it down. And I remember I said to True, True and I had an agreement that I was like, if something comes up that you don't understand, you come look for me. And he came to me a couple of times like, yo, what the fuck was that? And I'm like, okay, this is what that was. This is how international works. This is why we can't do this. This is why we couldn't give you money for that. And I have that ability to make people feel comfortable while also running business. So it was always frustrating to me that I didn't kind of take my career as far as I want. I remember when Jeff Dotis, who had been doing digital, was promoted over me and became my boss. He pulled me in my office and he put me in his office and he was like, I don't know why you report to me. You should not report to me. I don't even know what to say, but I will not get in your way.
And we'll be right back. Ready to launch your podcast? Merrick Studios offers comprehensive services, from concept development and seamless production to strategic marketing and monetization. Let your story take the mic. Visit merrickcreative.com/studios and let's get to work.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to our show.
I like Jeff Dotis. I didn't read him well at first, but once I got to know him a little bit, I was like, nah, I fucks with you, Jeff. He was cool. He was cool.
Yeah. And he lives in Lewisboro, which is like 20 minutes from our house. I've never run into him or anything. But when we moved up here, he was like super uncomfortable. Like I was like, oh, we moved to Richfield. And he was like,
really?
like, oh my God, am I going to run into you? I don't have to talk to you.
I'm going to see you at the Target.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
he was really good.
Before we move on to the next part, tell me, I know there's many of them. Tell me, because what people don't understand is, you see Chris Brown now, right? He's a superstar. Mm-hmm. I always tell people, and it's very tight. He's probably this. I always say 1A most talented artist I've ever been around. The most talented artist I've ever been around was R. Kelly. Just talent wise. I'm not talking about the talent wise. The writing, the playing, the produce. I've seen R. Kelly play Nat King Cole songs. Like but Chris,
Wow.
is right there. Not as far as playing, but just being a true artist. Like he'd come up to the office, he'd have drawn some dope shit on his Timbs, and he like, he was just so artistic. And obviously what happened.
He used to sleep in my office. He used to take naps in my office.
He was like 15, 16. He was a child when he signed to Jive. He was a child. So we literally saw him grow up, literally, right?
My son is 15. It freaks me out. I'm always like, Usher was 12 when I met him, and Chris was 15, and I'm like,
kid.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, then the Rihanna thing happened, and things kind of went crazy. But I'm glad to see him where he is now, because he is that level of talent to put out these records and do these massive shows, and even though they jerk him every year at the Grammys,
But do you know, have you ever really thought about how he's been able to do that?
I don't. I haven't figured it out.
So this is the brilliance of Chris. And this is where Chris does not get enough credit. Chris was the last of the artists on the deals. Like he was the last artist that wasn't on a 360.
True.
Right?
True.
Right? So he was just a straight
sign.
Whatever deal. Straight sign. So, but if you remember, when we were working Chris in the beginning, Chris started making mixtapes, and we were like,
first we were like, what are you doing?
Right? Because he could, what are you doing? Stop it. And the mixtapes, remember, his albums were all like, you had Yo, and he had the dimples and the smile, and he was like, da, 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 like the perfect little kid, perfect teenager that you wanted your daughter to bring home. And then the mixtapes were like, raw,
we're really him.
You're like,
that was him for real.
We're really right. And what Chris was brilliant and continues to be brilliant about, what Chris was at that time brilliant about, was he understood that he had to go high and he had to go low, right? And that if he went high, he could be on radio, and if he went low, he would have
in the
fame,
streets,
right? And in the streets, right? And not just really, I mean, yes, in the streets, but like he would have he'd have like if like Chris's mom, I mean, not Chris's mom, the mom would like Yo, and the daughter
like the street shit.
Would like the gutter,
the
street
mixtape
shit,
stuff,
right? So, right, and it was right at the beginning of like mixtapes mattering that he started doing that. So that's one thing that I've always thought was really brilliant about Chris, and to your point about him just being creative and being an artist, because Chris couldn't draw when we first signed him. Like he grew into this like amazing graffiti artist, right? Like he drew, it was like every other kid who draws.
He was doodling.
He was like, oh, that's cute.
Exactly.
But so he did that, and then his work ethic. It never mattered. Like Chris always wanted to be in the studio, and that was actually one of the big challenges when we had the merger, and we went to RCA. The biggest challenge that they had with Chris was that Chris wouldn't come to the office. Like I will never forget this. Like I went to see Chris. Tina was still managing him. I went to Chris and I was just like, hey, they want to see you. Like they want some FaceTime with you. And he was like, tell them to come to the studio. And I was like, no, they want to do it. It was like, I think it was Grammys or something. I was like, they want to do it at the Grammys. He was like, so they don't actually want to get to know me. And I was like, Chris, you got it. Like, and he was like, no, I don't, no. And I had to like literally sit there and be like, Chris, can you do it for me? Like, I need you to like, these are my bosses. These are people that control your release schedule. Like
money, they control the money.
You have to say hi. Yeah. He was like, and Chris was like, I don't need to talk to nobody but you. I'm good. I was like, no, you're not. Like, you can't do that. So Chris's entire, like, whether he was having problems or doing whatever, he was like, whatever was insanity might be going on in his life, he would always be in the studio. He would always be reporting. And he was always pro artist and pro writer. Right? Like Chris respected the writers. Like, I look at what Chris did for 7th Streeter as a writer, right? He understood, like Chris, I don't know where it comes from, because Chris is not the kind of person who's just gonna like do something for no reason. Like he's very, it's not that he's transactional, but he's very like deliberate. He's really stubborn. So if he decides he's going to do something, he's going to do it. If he decides he's not going to do it, he's not going to do it. But Chris always supported the writers and the producers. He always was out there caping for them. And I think that's like what he's seeing now, what's happening in his career now is an accumulation of being, to your point, he's just undeniable. He's absolutely undeniable. Did you see the meme thing that was going around last week? The woman that was like, she was probably in her like 40, like early 40s, late 30s, and she was at his show and she was nearly in tears because she was like, he's been on stage for 3 hours and I gotta go to work tomorrow. And you can hear him playing in the background. You can hear him singing song like in the background. He's on stage and she's in like the lobby area. And she's like, I paid $200 for this ticket. He's already done $400 worth of the show. I gotta leave. I don't like, and that's Chris. Like,
and
Chris
you know what? And he didn't do all his
show.
songs still in those 3 hours. He had more shit he could have done. He
had more shit.
Yeah.
And did you know that when we signed Chris, I will never forget this. Do you remember we did that big showcase at Planet Hollywood for everybody? It was like the first time like we had signed him, and a lot of people were like, he ain't, like no one wanted to believe that he was going to be amazing. And I put him in rehearsal and I went by rehearsals and I was like, hey, how's it going? Like, and Chris was like, he's like, oh, it's okay, and he was using a headset mic. And I always hated headset mics. They sound like shit. They work like shit. They're terrible. If somebody could like perfect the headset mic, it would be like a better world. So he had this headset mic and it was like plopping off and it just wasn't working. And I remember I said to him, I was like, Chris, that mic it's not working. Like, all right, so what do you usually perform with? And he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what kind of mic do you usually use? He was like, for what? I'm like, and this is when you're talking to a 15-year-old, right? He's like, for what? I'm like,
to sing.
I think it's an easy question. Like, when you perform, what microphone do you like to use? And he went, and finally, like, they clicked, and he was like, I've never performed before. I was like, squeeze me? He's like, I've never performed before. Chris did not come up. Like Usher, when I met Usher, he had won Star Search. Like he was, right? Chris had never been on stage until we did that Planet Hollywood
Virginia
performance. He was just a kid from Virginia, from Tappahannock, Virginia. I went to Tappahannock, by the way. It's a different story. But Chris, like, so Chris, like, his talent, I mean, we had millions of dollars invested in him. And I remember going back to the label meeting and being like, did anybody know that Chris Brown has never been on a stage before? And everyone was like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
people took
how did no one know that? Yeah, everybody just figured, like, of course, he did talent shows. He had never done a talent show. He hadn't, it was wild. I have never experienced that before. I've never had that.
Tell me about working at Tidal.
Yeah, that didn't really work for me. So, in fairness, I had been in one ecosystem for so long. I had been in that Sony BMG, BMG, Sony, eventually ecosystem, and with the same group of people. So I didn't know the Rock Nation people. So I didn't really have a relationship with them.
They're so almost cultish.
Yeah, it's cultish.
I know Lenny S.
And so
and Ty like a little teeny bit, and pretty much that's it.
Yeah, I don't know any of them. And Des hired me, and I actually I really, really liked Des, but she is frightening, right? So I remember as I was getting to know her, we'd be in meetings and we could be in a meeting and everybody would be buttoned up. Like we could talk about a project and they'd be like, okay, this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, great. And then Des would walk in the room and she'd be like, okay, tell me what's going on. And I would defer to the person who, I've always been, I don't believe that power should rest with me. Like, I'm like, if, we're working together, I'm going to give everybody the opportunity to shine. So I remember I turned to somebody who was really dope at their job. And I was like, okay, so you should explain to Des what we're doing. And they were like,
Rose.
because everybody there was
She's
so
very
afraid of
intimidating.
her. Exactly. And then she would be so upset. Like then Des would be upset because she would be like, nothing's gotten done. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, no, that's not true. Like these people are so scared of you. And she was just like looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like, why are they scared of me? I'm like, I don't know, but they're scared of you. Um, but when I got there, it was a couple of things. I got there at a time I can we talk about me leaving RCA
Okay,
for a
let's talk about
minute?
it.
So I left RCA. I was pissed. I was pissed because what basically happened was they hired someone to take over marketing who had never done marketing before. And you know who that was.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was that person really was, and I had known that person for almost 20 years at that point, and I was actually looking forward to working with them. And when they had him take over marketing, what he did things that were just grimy. Like, for example, I wasn't allowed to book me, not just me, but like you're like I'm like an SVP, and I'm not permitted to book conference rooms anymore. You had to go through his office so that he could decide if your meeting was something that he wanted to sit in on, right? And he was using, I know when I'm being used. Like you can't, like,
Yeah.
seriously, like come on. Um, he really was trying to use the capital of other people's relationships to learn what the hell he was supposed to be doing, and also to develop relationships, right? So I stopped having meetings in conference rooms. I did all my meetings in my office, right? And that made him pissed. Like that pissed him off. And then the other thing he used to do in meetings, which was like my favorite, this was like my favorite cat and mouse game. We'd be in a meeting and it would be like, hey, so we're gonna, we'd have this big release coming up, and we'd start talking about it. And he would basically, they would turn to him as the head of marketing, and they'd be like, what are we going to do? And he would say, hey, yeah, I've been in some conversations. Like, I'm going to use myself as an example, but there was more than
Mm-hmm.
just me involved. He would say, well, we're trying to narrow it down. And so Lisa, here are the things that, like, the things that we were concerned about would come up in the conversation. And then he would turn to me and be like, so Lisa, for that project, like, what are you thinking? And at first I was not totally paying attention, and I would be like, well, I think blah, blah, blah. We should do this approach. We should do that strategy. And then one day I was like, this
Yeah,
motherfucker's
he
using
don't know
me.
what he's talking about, so he's letting you
He don't
answer
know
the
what he's
questions.
talking
Yeah.
about. Right. Right. So what I started doing was he would be like, he'd turn to me and be like, so Lisa, what are you thinking? And I'd say, I need to kind of, this is the first time I'm really hearing this. Let me digest it a bit why don't you go ahead and you take the lead and
Yeah.
let him know. And I remember that look on his face the first time I did that. He was like, this bitch, like,
Yeah.
And so our relationship, it deteriorated very rapidly. I would have my artists and managers loved me. Like they loved me. Like we had great relationships with them. So they would come up to the office, they'd say hi, they'd play records, we'd
Mm-hmm.
have lunch. But I'm also very much a person with boundaries. I'm real clear that my personal life is my personal life. Like I'm
Yeah.
not that person. And I remember we had Tinashe, and her manager came up to see me. She was in between records, in between singles, I think. And she came up there, the management came up to see me, and they were really excited about some records, and they played them for me. And I was like, oh, that was great. And we were chatting, and we were like, well, what about this? And what about that? And what do you think about timing? And we're just like, we were meeting, but really we were just hanging out because we had a good relationship. And after they left, like the next day, he came down to my office, and he was like, why didn't you call me into the Tinashe meeting? And I was like, because it wasn't a meeting. They stopped by my office. And he was just like, in the future, when you have a meeting with any manager or any artist, I need to be informed so that I can decide if I'm going to be there. And I was just like, are you okay? Okay. Okay. And the final straw was, I will never forget this. Like, we had an issue, Chris, because you remember Chris used to just
Mm-hmm.
put records out, and we'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh God, right? So Chris just like put a record out, and I was chasing it down to get it at iTunes and Spotify and everything. And we got it. It was live. Art was there. It was like all the things were there. And he called me, not Chris, the other person. He called me and he said, hey, so international, so there's a problem with how you handled the Chris Brown release. And I was just like, okay. And he said, it has been said,
It
right?
has
Which
been
I'm like the
said.
wrong person to say it to, because I'm like, who said it?
Yeah.
Who is they, and what, get them on the phone. So he's like, well, it's been said that you did XYZ and you should have done it this way. And I was just like, but that's not how it works. That's not, because at the time, like Apple was very strict at that time. And so you could get up to Spotify within 24 hours, but Apple
Okay.
always took a couple of days. And, it was just like the quality control. It was
Mhm.
always like a thing. And he was just like, well, it should have gone up everywhere at once. And I was like, that was not a possibility, because Chris put the record out and we were, that was that's not how it works. And I said, okay, you need to put whoever has this issue on the phone with me, because I don't know. I don't do that. I don't play games. I was like, I don't play games. If I have a problem with somebody, for better or worse, I come straight at you. So I was just like, okay, so he puts me on the phone. He calls Monica. I love Monica. He calls Monica Cornea and a couple other people he called her, and she was in someone else's office who worked in sales, and they put it on speaker, and I sat quietly because I knew I wasn't wrong. And he was like, yes, I'm talking to Lisa and I'm telling her that, she should have done this. And I need you to really blah, 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 blah. And he just talked himself into a corner, and they were like, that's not how it works. And that's not what we said. We said that we wish that Chris hadn't done this so that we could get the record up properly. But Lisa did the only thing that we could do, because that's not how it works. Right. And he was pissed. Because I didn't say anything. I just sat and listened and said nothing. And he was pissed. So fast forward, we're moving into the new building, and I was standing at Caroline Williams' office. I was in her doorway talking to her, and I saw Anne-Marie Weiss walk by, and HR had already left the building. We were the last. Remember, I don't know if you weren't there. I'm saying we were the last. We were the last company to move into the building, because basically Tom Corson was like, y'all are not going to have us be guinea pigs. We got too many things going on, so we want to move last. Well, after you guys figured out the internet and figured out all the shit that's not going to work. So I was standing in Carolyn's office, and Anne-Marie walked by, and I remember thinking, like, why is she here? Right? Because I knew they'd already moved. And then my assistant came over and was just like, I had left my phone in my office. My assistant came over and was like, I've been looking for you. He wants you in his office. And I was like, I turned to Carolyn and I said, I think I'm going to get laid off today. And she looked at me with horror, because it meant that she would have gotten all my projects. Right. So she was just like, what? Like, I can't take all your, she was like, don't even play. I'm like, all right, let me see how it goes. So I have always felt this was my finest hour. I walked in the office and HR was there. The person that was the head of marketing there was there. And I think that was it. There might have been one other person. I don't remember. And I walked in and I stood at the doorway and I was like, oh, okay. Am I going to be working here when this conversation is over? And he said, can you just come in and sit down? I was like, no, I cannot. Am I going to be working here when this conversation is over? Will I continue? Will I still be employed here? And he said, well, we're making some changes. And I was just like, okay. So the answer is no. And he was like, and you could just see, he was just
damn,
like,
man.
bitch. Because we had already.
She would let me fire her like I want to.
I went, nope. So he was like, well, he just was like so exasperated. He was like, well, no, you're not. I was like, okay, then I don't need to speak to you.
Well, what are we talking?
She needs to speak with my attorney. There's nothing for you and I to talk about. And he was like, well, can you just, he was like, well, can you come in? I was like, no. And I didn't even close his door. I was like, no, I can't. There's nothing for us to talk about. And part of where that came from was he took me to lunch. And I'll never forget this. He took me to lunch and he said, Lisa, this might not work out. And I'm like, I am not the one. So I was like, I agree. I will let you know how I feel about it. And from that point, he was just undone. And I had documented everything. I had gone to HR about it. I had gone to Tom Corson about it. I had gone to everybody about it. I documented it all. I had a running diary
everything that's
of
going
all
on.
of the really just inappropriate. Yeah. And what they did was, because his role didn't exist, what they did was they pulled down from the GM, right? So he took on a lot of Corson stuff. And then they pulled up from the SVPs. So I used to sit in the Sony worldwide planning meetings and have a landscape. I understood the landscape of globally what we were doing. Suddenly I'm not in those meetings anymore. And I was pissed because I was just so I'm just a product manager. I happen to be an SVP, but I'm just you have reduced me to a product manager who cannot book a conference room? No. No. And so I was really bitter, really, really bitter. And I got a great
Mm-hmm.
package. There was no, they didn't play with my money. I got my bonus. But they did try to, they tried to tell Mark Pitts, I'll never forget Mark. Mark was pissed. And they tried to tell Mark that they were like, well, you need to understand that he had a tough decision to make. He had to choose between Carolyn and Lisa. And so, Mark is loyal. And I've known Mark
Mm-hmm.
since Uptown. So, Mark was when he was managing Biggie, like
Mm-hmm.
I knew him from then when Biggie was on Uptown. So Mark was immediately ready to like go to fight for me. And I was like, listen, don't let them trick you. I said, the problem is they have to pay for him now. I said, they need my money. This has nothing to do with a tough decision between me and Carolyn. Don't let them lie to you. That has nothing to do with it. They created a position that they
Yeah,
didn't
they
have the
made it.
money
Yeah,
for. And now they need my salary. Right. And they laid off, like, if you do the math, they laid off that day, they laid off me and one other person. And that
the
would be about
salary.
the right number. Right. So I was like, don't let them bamboozle you. Like, it's just you support Carolyn, because he wasn't mad at Carolyn, but he was just like, and I'm like, no, don't let them pit me and
Yeah,
Carolyn
it
against you.
wasn't.
Like,
Yeah,
we
it
were never
wasn't
pitted
about
against,
that.
like, Carolyn and I, we weren't, I wouldn't call us
Yeah,
friends,
well,
but
we didn't have no
we
beef
were
and
always
shit.
on the
Yeah, in the
same
problems.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were always on the same side. We always saw what was happening. And that was really disheartening. And it kind of like, I remember I ran into Sylvia Rohn once at the beach in the vineyard. And I was like, Sylvia, I said, I got to tell you, as much as I want to excel in this business, I'm not willing to sacrifice what you sacrificed. I want a family. I want to, there are all these things that I want for my life. And Sylvia was like, it was so amazing because she got real quiet. She and I aren't close. But she got really quiet and she said, you're the first person to say that to me. You're the first person to, like, thank you for seeing what I don't have because of the decisions I made in terms of my career. And that, and being let go at RCA, and then going the title to your question. I'm sorry, I'm so long-winded. Like, I love to talk. Going the title, it was literally like working, it was like the 90s. Like, people would call you and scream on you. And I was like, this is not 1991. You are not going to talk to me like that. It was also one of the things that was really interesting about working a title at that time was there was this kind of like this, not influx, but they were really working with I can't what is his name? I can't think of his name. He's a Dominican artist. Actually, Usher did a record with him. And so there was this like kind of Dominican artist, Latin artist thing
Mm-hmm.
that they were cultivating. And it was really awkward because I grew up in a Dominican neighborhood. So I understood everybody. I understood what they were trying to do and I understood the culture, but I don't speak Spanish. So I was always kind of not really able to be part of those conversations because
It
they would
wasn't
eventually,
Spanish. Yeah.
flip it into Spanish. And I would just be like, fuck. So that was hard. And then I got sick. I have lupus, and I ended up, I was on my way home, and I ended up having like a little health crisis, and was, in the hospital. I actually resigned from Tidal from the hospital. Because I didn't know them. If I had been at Sony, or RCA when I got sick, I would have
Yeah.
just taken a leave. And but I didn't know the Tidal people, and I didn't enjoy being there. Like, it just was so like, not that it was toxic, but it was just so like,
Mm-hmm.
geez, nobody trusted anybody. Everybody's like screaming on people, and the team was great. It was an amazing group of people there. They went on to do some really great things with Tidal. And Tidal, I don't know if you've ever really used it. The sound
Yeah, I
quality on
use it now.
Tidal is
I
like,
use it
it's
all the
for
time. Yeah,
audiophile. Okay,
it
so it's
sounds
for
way better than everything
audiophiles.
else.
Sounds way better than everything else. Um, but I wasn't in a place where I could ask them to
Yeah,
understand because
yeah,
I
yeah,
did not
yeah.
know them.
But
I
tell me
didn't know them
about
at all. You know,
persistence of joy.
persistent
Persist
joy,
in joy.
persistent
Tell me
joy.
about that.
Yeah, persistent joy. So I started when I left, and I was probably sick
Wow.
for about 2 years after I left Tidal. And I really, I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. And one of the things what I loved about my job always was artist development. I loved being able to sit down and talk to an artist and have someone come in. I always say, like, I loved, have Pink come in the door and she's in a group and the group is really not very good and she's trying to figure out who she wants to be, and connecting her with David Myers, and like I loved that part. In addition to just the logistics, like I love logistics. I love a plan. I love executing a plan. But the biggest thing I saw was, I said, well, I want to continue to support creatives. And at the time, like now, 10 years later, which is crazy, coaching is so kind of, I mean, first of all, you have people that are just like, I give good advice, I'm a coach. That's not what it is. I went and I got my training, and I understand the modality of coaching. And what coaching really does more than anything else is it says, okay, what do we do from this point forward? It doesn't really look at the past except for information, right? So that's the probably biggest thing, is we say, okay, well, what do you want to do now? And holding people accountable and getting them to get rid of their blocks. And it spoke to me. I kept saying to people, I was like, I want to help artists. And I didn't realize at the time when I was saying that I was describing coaching. And having gone to UVA, our alumni association does these like career development programs every once in a while. And I was on this call and I was just like, a little bit like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Cause I couldn't, we live an hour and a half from the city. I can't, health wise, I can't make that kind of commute every day. Yeah, I can't, I have a lot of like, I have to rest. Like I am a person, whatever. But I kept saying it to people, and then I went to this, like, I did this webinar, and there was this woman, and she was talking about coaching. And I was like, holy shit, that's what I've been saying to people. That's what I've been trying to describe. So I ended up, and I'm not woo-woo, so I didn't want to do the, like, we're going to talk about your aura. Like, I wanted to actually have it based in science, based in helping people in a way that was, do no harm, and helping I just wanted to help. Like, I'm a helper, and that's what I wanted. And I did my training, and then I just started putting it out there that I was coaching. And ironically, I have only done a couple of things in the music business. Like I did like a seminar, a webinar for Universal Music that Toya Summers connected me with them. And I did like I had like 500 people on a call or something crazy. But most of my clientele are filmmakers and storytellers. And so I work with, which isn't really that much different, honestly. But I primarily work with women, mostly women of color. And I work with a lot of fellowships. This current climate is a little hard because a lot of the funding for the programs that I would work with they were diversity based, so they're being attacked. But I've done work with the Canadian Academy, which is like their version of, the Oscars. I've worked with indigenous filmmakers and editors and storytellers through them, which I loved. I've worked with the Center for Asian American Media, which was such a learning lesson. Like, my grandparents were immigrants, so I'm second generation. And I was like, initially when I started pitching business to the Center for Asian American Media, I was like, well, they're never going to hire me. I'm like, this black woman, like, they're going to be like, you don't get us. And then I found that the conversations were the same. They were like, the same conversations. So I've been doing that. And I'm in the process of kind of pivoting it. I think what I would like my platform to develop into over the next phase of my company and of my career is making this movement from like mentorship. I feel like we've done a really good job at mentoring. I think that the creative community, the Black creative community, the community of color, we mentor. We do a really good job at mentoring. What I don't think we do, I think we are in a time right now, particularly with the current climate, where we need to move to a patronage model, meaning like putting people in place to succeed, not just being there to help them when they're succeeding, but actually like do, because that's what the white boys do. They decide, I look at my experience at RCA, they decided that he was going to be the leader, and they surrounded him with everything that he needed to take that role. That's what patronage looks like. That's not mentoring. That's what patronage looks like. So I don't know what that me. I don't know what that practically means for me, but I feel like with every bone in my body, I know that patronage was what made my career successful. It was Andre, with all of the flaws of working there and all the crazy shit, it was Andre looking at me and saying, "You're groomed for greatness. You should be a publicist." And I was like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." Right. It was LA being like, "Hey, you know what? You're really good as a publicist, but I think you would, but I see that the corporate guys really gravitate to you, because they were all Germans. My mother worked for a German airline. All of her professional people, so
Yeah.
I could talk to the Germans and I could read German. So I would get like, they would get like memo, like something would go around and it was in German and be like, "Oh, we forgot to translate." And I'd be like, "No, I can read it," so they liked me. And it was all patronage. Like even if you think about your own success, there was some point where somebody just saw something in you and they became your patron, right? And I don't think that we specifically as a Black community in entertainment and in, I would argue, in music, but even in politics, everything, I don't think that we tap into patronage enough. I think that we feel that, they've got to pull themselves up and they got to do and they got to prove and then I'll help them, right? Because we're so conditioned to think that we have to be, twice as
We
good as
do.
everybody, which we do, right? But there is also that place where we can decide that someone's going to be our next leader. That's what happened with Obama. I've always shared that, I've shared this story many times with people, that Obama's success was almost the result of, there was patronage, but he came to New York. I'll never forget this. My mom, again, knew everybody. She moved to political circles. He came to New York to kiss the ring for all of the Black politicians to say, "I want to run for president." And they told him not to. All those like the Charlie Rangels
David
who endorsed Hillary and all that,
Jenkins.
David Jenkins, all that. They told him it wasn't his turn. Do you know who they told him? Did you ever know like who they said whose turn it was? David Patterson. Moved on to David Patterson. Right.
Was a governor.
Because it was when he was
Yeah.
governor.
He
it
was
was
part
before
of
he,
that.
yeah.
Basil,
And they were
he was
like,
part
no,
of the Gang of Four. So it's his turn.
Exactly. It's his turn. Because they never believed that they could elect a president. So they were trying to to amass power, but they never believed in a Black president. And I've always felt really strongly that what the beauty of Barack Obama being elected, and I went to a couple of fundraisers for him. The beauty of it was that he always knew he could be president, and the people that supported him knew that he could be president, and so he didn't need those
That's just
other
sorry,
people.
bro. That's just, in my opinion, that's just happening now with Mondami in New York. He didn't go through those people,
100%.
the
Yeah.
usual, preachers and politicians, Peace to Al Sharpton and all those guys, but he didn't go through any of those guys. And him and his crew, Che Osei, Reggie's son, and his crew, they're like, "Nah, he could be the mayor. He could be the mayor." And they're like, "He's not kissing no rings." And they're like, that's where they're pissed, because they're like, well, if he gets in, he don't owe us no favors.
He's not beholden.
So now what are we gonna do? Because
that's right.
He got to come back and say, "Yo, because you did this, I'm gonna do this." He don't have that on his back. And so it's a very similar thing we're seeing, and I think we're gonna see that kind of repeat itself moving forward. Before we wrap up,
but that's what we did. Wait, but I just have to say that that's what we did in the music business in the 90s. If that was patronage, those boutique labels, those like the LaFaces and the Def Jams, they decided to put money in a place that they didn't understand necessarily, and because they knew that there was an upside. I was having this conversation with my son recently, and I was like, you have to understand that when I was in the music business, when I was starting my career, record labels and distribution labels sold little shiny discs. They didn't give a shit what was on them. They just sold little shiny discs. And the reason that the collapse of, it was like, and you think about the margin on a little shiny disc that cost like $1.25 to make, that was wholesale for $6.99, retail for sometimes $15, from $9.99 to $15. I was like, those margins were there. When that became a file and you no longer controlled the medium, that was the demise of the music business. That's why you don't have artist development anymore. That's why you don't have, breakthrough artists. That's why you have people chasing TikTok numbers, and finding and signing somebody
Mm-hmm.
based on SoundCloud and stuff like that, because you don't have the ability to have that patronage. You don't have, TLC made
Absolutely.
Outkast possible, right? You don't have that anymore because you don't have those margins. You don't have, the
Mm-hmm.
money's not there anymore. But I do believe that mindset in our community, we got complacent because we thought that we were doing okay, right? And this current climate made it
We're not.
100% clear we are not. We are vulnerable, right? So I'm really interested in that commitment to patronage, in that commitment to creating vehicles for other
To
people
shine.
to succeed
Yeah.
beyond
Yeah.
mentorship, right? Where
Yeah.
there's money on the table. And so I
Yeah.
don't
But
know
now,
what
but
that looks like,
mentorship, you're right. Mentorship doesn't
but
always mean cash. It means time. Yeah,
mentorship means
exactly.
somebody got
And
somebody
that's
to
cool
talk
and that's
to.
valuable. But like you said, if there's no cash behind it, it kind of runs its course pretty quickly. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
my kind of is jammed up, and talking to this person over a cup of coffee is not really helping that. You know what I mean? Um,
Exactly.
before we wrap up,
Exactly.
two of your favorite artists.
Oh, that's easy. My absolute, like, every day that I miss is Miguel. I miss Miguel. I love Miguel. And my favorite artist to work with,
Okay.
Usher. And my favorite artist as a person,
Okay.
T-Boz.
Okay.
I love that. I love me some T-Boz, but I always struggled because I felt like I couldn't be a real friend to her because of
Yeah.
my role.
Yeah.
But I always loved her. She's
Okay.
just dope. She's a
Tell
good
me,
people.
because you're about to experience it. Two of your favorite places in Martha's Vineyard.
All right, let me see. I'm not gonna
Yeah, but I
gatekeep.
about to say she might not say it because you know
Uh,
what? She don't want your niggas over there.
oh really? Oh damn, I shouldn't. All right, I'm not gonna gatekeep. Um, well, number one is my
Of
house.
course.
You know I'm a homebody. My house. Like I'm happy to be up in my house. And there's a restaurant called Guard East that nobody goes to. This is like, I should gatekeep it, but I won't. Like, a lot of people tend not to go there because they don't think there's parking, because where the restaurant is, there's only like 4 parking spaces, but you actually park across the street. And it's like right on the water, and you can have oysters and drinks. And so that's become a place that we like to kind of post up, and, it's basically like,
Yeah,
tell
you'll be
people,
there
come
hanging
by.
out.
We're going to be there for like 3-4 hours, just chilling. Yeah, hanging out. And then my other one would be, honestly, any friend's
That's what it
house
is.
porch. Like, it's just,
It's the house
yeah,
hopping.
that's what it is.
It's the house hopping. You know,
It is.
it's the house
It's the house hopping. There's a lot of politics to house
tons,
hopping. You don't just walk up
tons.
on somebody's porch. You stand a respectable distance back until you are invited to ascend to the porch. You
Yeah,
don't
don't
go in
just
people's
walk on in
houses.
there. You gotta be invited or be with somebody who's
Mm.
invited, and you get properly introduced. And pe- people are gonna ask you where you went to school. They're gonna ask you these things. Don't be offended. It just is what it
Yeah.
is. And
Nope. And they're not going to
yeah,
ask you what you do.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
nuance. They don't want to know what you
Where you
do.
came
They want to
from,
know where you
exactly.
came
Because if you're
from and how you
here,
got here.
you're doing
Yeah.
something. So we don't really need to kind of figure that part out. We'll get to that maybe at another time. We don't want to figure out how you got here. How'd you get here?
But who are your
Yeah.
people?
And
How
it's
do you
very
get
interesting
here?
now with the vineyard
Yep.
because of obviously a few years ago with the publicity of the Obamas going every summer, and now you have this year you had the series Forever, and
Yep.
in the Ralph Lauren
And the Ralph
collection.
Lauren
So now it's like
collection.
a new I'm not gonna spot a new spotlight on the vineyard, because it was and so it's kind of people are like, oh, the vineyard is
Hmm.
like, and I hate to sound like a dickhead. I'm like, yo, but it's been going on for like 60 years, bro. You're kind of late. And
More than
yes, I'm
that.
saying
It's like 200 years. It's like
multi-generation. Yeah.
multi-generational.
It's
It's 100 years. It's
a
at least
solid
100
100.
years. Yeah.
It's like you're kind of late, and that's fine,
Yep.
but just go up there. Like, I hope somebody's given the newbies, for lack of a better term, these lessons, like what to do and what not to do, and it's not about being bougie and not about
the
being.
vineyard
It's
will
not
humble
that. It's
you.
just there's just a kind of a protocol to it. It's all. It's so.
Yeah. Most people, what I find is like most people, because we've suddenly become the old school people, which I think is hilarious because I don't feel that way. I still like we bought a house that belonged to another family, and there's a full on like 3 generations of people who, if they're like, where do you live again? I'm like, we live in the Pope's house. And they're like, oh, I know that house. I used to go there when I was a kid, or I know, so it's really funny because even at this point, we're still like talking about the
Exactly.
people who lived there 20 years ago. But the thing about the vineyard that what happens is people get on the island and either you immediately get it and you're like, oh, this is for me, or you don't. And you're like, what's the hype? Like I know plenty of people who think it's a slum. They're just like, there are no good hotels, there's no
Not for that.
like
It
they're
ain't
just
gonna
like,
be
oh,
it's not gonna be a W.
It's hilarious. It's not for that. No, nope. But what's happening that's crazy is all these West Coast people, because of the film festival, like take it step back even further. It's on the forever track because of the film festival. It kind of seeped into that creative community. And you have, I believe
that
Kenyon Barris has a house there now. Like you see all of these like Hollywood people who are coming there. But let me tell you how now the Texas people are coming there. Somebody built in East Shop. They built a full on. They somebody. I don't know if this is true, but my friend told me that they're from Sugarland, and they built a Sugarland, Texas house in the middle of East Shop with all these quaint New England cottages. Is this gigantic house with 2-story doors and glass, and the windows are tinted, and you're like, it's so Texas. It's really funny. So there's like a whole different, like the West, where it used to just really be East Coast. I've met so many people from the West Coast, like who came for the film festival, fell in love, figured it out. But it is really, it's a special place. It's really, there's
thank
nothing
you,
like
Lisa.
it. There's nothing like it.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. This is fun. You're the best. You're the best. I did. I really enjoyed it. And I feel like, you're really good at this. And just thank you. It was just wonderful. It was really wonderful. I've never really threaded I've never thought about the threads of my career. And, it's just like, you just keep your head down.
Part of it is
grind.
just shutting up. Like I listen to podcasts and I hate the podcast hosts that don't shut up, or it's like dude, just shut up. Like we want to hear what the guest has to say. We don't
I know
need
exactly what you mean.
Just shut up, let them talk. That's why you got them there, and a lot of people don't do that. Yeah.
I will literally turn off a podcast when they do that.
Exactly,
like I'll be like,
exactly.
Like,
Let the person talk. You know what I'm saying?
For that.
But thank you.
And I love one of the things I love about what you're doing. I just have to say this too, that one of the things I love about what you're doing is, yes, there are artists, but like if I look at my career and I think of all the artists whose lives I touched and impacted, like that, it's so incredible to be a part of that community and to have had the opportunity to change people's lives. And my check-in with new artists was always, how's the airport? That was always my measure. I'd be like, how's the airport? And they used to always, like, I would never explain. I would just be like, how's the airport? And they'd be like, why do you always ask me that? I remember asking Chris that. I was like, what's the airport? Like, how's it when you walk through the airport these days? And he would just be looking at me, he's 15. So he's looking at me like, oh, you sound stupid. Like, what are you talking about? And to have, like, at some point I'd be like, how's the airport?
That's when you know it's
shit,
working.
I can't even walk through the airport.
Exactly. When the sky caps and exactly the lady at Annie's press was like, oh my God. You know you did the job. You know you did the job. Exactly.
That's right. I did my job. That's how I know I did my job. And when you can't walk through the airport, I am a success. So, but thank you, Jeff. And thank you for all of the support over the years as well. You've been a wonderful friend, and love you to pieces.
I love you too, Lisa. You can catch Mixed and Mastered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button, leave a review, and tell a friend. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sledge. Mixed and Mastered is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.